So this is your full topic revision of life in modern Britain. Okay, we're going to make a start then by looking at the UK in action and what it can do in different circumstances. So if we have a look at the two case studies then, we've got UK in Northern Ireland between 1968 and 1998. Basically there was a lot of problems in Ireland, as you know, between the Republic and Northern Ireland over religion, over being part of the UK and so on and so forth, borders and everything. So the UK tried peacefully to sort the conflict out between the Unionists and the Nationalists. In the end, the UK government took control. There were lots of bombings in the UK from a terrorist organisation called the IRA. This led to peace talks, because obviously that's the whole aim, which led to the Good Friday Agreement. And in 1998, Northern Ireland and Ireland agreed in a referendum and peace was brought around. The next case study to know about is the UK in Kosovo between 1998 and 2008. So the UN, the United Nations, had tried to maintain peace, but that had failed. There'd been a civil war in Kosovo with thousands of refugees. NATO, which we'll learn about in a bit, sent in armed intervention, and the UK added 3,000 soldiers. In the end, Serbia surrendered and the UK stayed there as a military force for 10 years to maintain peace. So we've got two ways that the UK has acted in international conflict and helped to resolve that. Remember, the UK can go into international conflict in three ways. The first one, and the best one, the easiest option, is mediation. And this is a bit like what pastoral staff do when two kids have had an argument. They'll sit them down together and try to talk through their problems. So mediation is like counselling for countries when they're not getting on. Try and get them to come to some kind of a peace agreement and an arrangement. Sometimes that doesn't work, so then they have to put in sanctions, and sanctions can be economic. So it could be that you refuse to trade with a country, it could be that you boycott their goods. So when the UK and the whole world was campaigning against apartheid in South Africa, they put a trade embargo on their goods, and that's one way that you can apply sanctions. And then the last one they can do is use of force, which is where you send the military in. That's always the last option. It involves, it's a hard power. We don't want to do it, but as you can see in Kosovo, sometimes it has to happen. So the three ways the UK can act in international conflict: mediation, sanctions, force. Okay. Another thing you need to know about then, thinking on the global scale, is NGOs, or non-governmental organisations, and these can make a change to the world. So things like Oxfam or Amnesty International, and they can help. So they can be like charities, but they can also be massive pressure groups as well, and try and to get change. So they can help and demand change. They can demonstrate, use media campaigns. They've got to be peaceful because they work alongside governments. So things like the Red Cross in Syria, when there was the civil war, they went in and gave people food and water and shelter. They'll help out with all those kind of things, but they do try and work with the governments to assist the governments in giving the people the best options that they can, and also trying to put pressure on to make life better for people. So they have to be quite neutral, really, without sort of going against governments. However, if they're there to look after the people, that's what they'll put as their primary focus. Another thing you need to know about then is the refugee crisis. So, because of things like the civil war in Syria, we have had a mass issue with refugees. Remember, the UK has only got 1% of the world's refugees, so it's not a massive issue to this country. However, the media like to play it up like they do. In 2016, the Immigration Act was put in control. This was higher control over immigration. It did allow 3,000 child refugees into the UK without, obviously their adults may have died, may have only been able to afford to send them. But then the government actually revoked this in called the Dubs Amendment, and this led to a massive outcry and protests against the government. Okay, UK and international organisations then. We'll just remind of ourselves from rights and responsibilities about justice, international justice. So we've got the International Court of Justice, and this is like the World Civil Court. This settles disputes between countries, maybe on trade and those kind of things. You've then got the International Criminal Court, and this is for criminal law, and this brings world leaders and countries to justice who have been possibly going against human rights or have committed war crimes. So people like Colonel Gaddafi of Libya, they will be taken to the International Criminal Court. So you've got the International Civil Court and the International Criminal Court. The next thing you need to know about is the Geneva Conventions, and this was rules that apply to wartime or conflict, and it's to try and help people not get hurt in war who don't deserve it or shouldn't be. So for example, you're not allowed to attack the sick or wounded in war, you're not allowed to attack civilians, that's international humanitarian law, or people who have already been taken prisoner. Okay, so if we look at the big chart, then you could be asked about any of these organisations. So these are global organisations that the UK is or was a part of. You could be asked for example, a role of NATO in a 1 or 2 mark question, or you could be asked an 8 mark question as to whether or not the UK should remain as part of that organisation. So let's go through first then NATO. Are the UK a leading member? Yep, NATO, remember, is the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, and it's a defence treaty primarily between the USA and Western Europe, especially us. We've always had this special relationship with America, and it's this kind of thing. It was kind of after World War II. They didn't really want any issues in Western Europe they didn't want Western Europe to fall to communism, so they agreed that they would have this defence treaty to look out for one another. It's brilliant because that's massive support and power. You'd certainly want the American army on your side, lots of power there, lots of people, lots of money, lots of equipment. So that's always a good thing for defence. It makes links with other countries. It's good to have those allies. It's good to be part of these defensive treaties. But against it, it was set up to be against communism. Could that be seen as an attack on other countries before we've even got anywhere? Is it initially starting problems? And also, do we really want to be in a military treaty with the USA with Trump as president? His controversial views and links with other countries could cause us more problem than we want. Okay, the next one, the UN. You'll never be asked if you want to be part of the United Nations or not. We are part of the United Nations. 193 countries are. The UN is a global organisation primarily there for maintaining peace and security. It makes decisions on world issues, and it's about human rights. Remember, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was born with the UN. So the UN is a good thing. It's global, it's peacekeeping. Everybody should be part of it. You are not going to be asked if we should leave. What you might be asked is, should we remain part of the Security Council? There are 15 countries in the Security Council. 5 of them are permanent. The others have to get voted in. The 5 permanent members are us, France, the USA, China and Russia. Why do only us 5 get to stay in? What makes us better or more important than those other countries? That's really not very democratic. And also, why are we in like cahoots with China? We know their human rights violations. They have mass public executions without a fair trial. They are holding Muslims in concentration camps, and we're busy buddies with them. It's not really very good. And also, any member in the UNSC can veto another idea, so stop it. So, for example, if we said, right, we're going to challenge China's abuse of Muslims, China vote, no, you're not, and then it doesn't happen. Okay, the G8. This is an economic group of 8 countries, can go down to 7, and it should be the top economies within the world. So it's about industry, economy, and politics. It's brilliant for us to be in it because it benefits us by trade and economy. We can make links with these other countries, make deals with them, borrow money, arrange all kinds of economic good things for us. But then the bad things, what do we actually do to help other countries? What do we do to help poor countries? Surely we should ask poor countries to come along so we can see what we as the rich countries can be doing to support them. There's always mass arguments and mass protests when wherever the G8 is held against capitalism. So it's indulging capitalism and indulging our wealth when there are other countries who are absolutely suffering in poverty. The next one's the Commonwealth, and if you remember, this is the decolonised nations of the British Empire, so it's kind of like the new British Empire, and it's sharing values on human rights, the law, education, medicine, and sharing ideas on how best to conduct ourselves as countries. So it's really good because you can discuss these social issues, it commits to those values. We've got the Commonwealth Games every 4 years, which is always entertaining as well. However, lots of people don't agree with it, and actually a lot of countries have left because they just see it as what's called neo-colonialism. They just see it as the new British Empire. Why would anybody want to be part of that? Do we actually do anything to help these countries? We don't give them money. We don't, help them out in wartime. So what actually is the point? And then the last one, the EU, we've left that now. It started out as a common market for goods, again, not too much longer after World War II. We joined in the 1970s, and basically it became the European Community, and then the European Union after the Maastricht Treaty. And in 1993, at the Maastricht Treaty, it was agreed that if you were in the European Union, your people could move and live in another European country. That's why there's 1 million Brits live in Spain. That's why we have so many European people live in this country. It's good for business, it's brilliant for trade, we've got that freedom of movement, and there's no tax on the trade. Should we leave? Well, lots of people don't like the freedom of movement. They don't like the fact that we've got an influx of Europeans. It does lower wages, and we've never entered the euro currency. If we did and the euro collapsed, then it would collapse in all of those countries, and then we'd be in a broken economy. We've also got laws given to us, so there's about 300 or more laws that have been given to us from the EU, and that breaks the sovereignty of Parliament. So if you remember, under sovereignty of Parliament, our laws are supposed to be only made and changed in the Houses of Parliament. Because we've had laws given to us by the EU, that breaks it. But also remember, we have an uncodified constitution, which means that that rule about sovereignty of Parliament is not written down anywhere. So the EU can do that. Okay, so this bit here comes into every single one of your modules, which is the brilliant thing about citizenship, because it cuts down on revision. So this is about making a change in society. So if you have a look at the top box, you've got ways to be an active citizen, ways you can enter the democratic process. Voting's the easy one. You guys can't vote because you're too young. You can sign petitions, you can start a petition, and if you remember, we looked at 38 degrees. And remember, if you get 100,000 signatures, your campaign has to be debated in the House of Parliament, so you could effectively get laws changed. Also remember, we are in an uncodified constitution, so legally it doesn't have to happen because that's not written down anywhere, although usually it does. So for example, at the moment, because of coronavirus, I've just signed a petition a while ago to make your exams easier next year. That's being debated in Parliament next week because it got 180,000 signatures. You can also go and lobby your MP. To lobby someone means that you just keep protesting to them. So you can email them, you can go and see them at the Houses of Parliament and try and convince them to see your point of view. You guys, when you're older, can stand as a local councillor or an MP, and that's the brilliant part about living in a democracy. You don't have to be born into power, you can become powerful. You could also join a political party. Even at your age, you guys can join the youth version of your political party. And you can also join or start a pressure group. Anything that you want to do, you can. Remember, with pressure groups, they are brilliant because it's a huge part of being in a democracy that you can act out your protests, that you can campaign, you can get things changed. And think of some of the pressure groups that have, for example, lots of pressure to allow gay marriage, lots of pressure to ban fox hunting, lots of pressure to do things like save the 7 cornfields by by the top of the Northway. So pressure groups can work. They're a brilliant way of people acting out their protests. The only problem is with them though, who's the leader? It's not really democratic. People just become the leader. And also, sometimes they can go too far. For example, remember the Animal Liberation Front and what they did when they went and dug up the grave of the grandmother of a business owner who tested on animals. That's completely illegal, absolute direct action, but really, disgusting as well. And some pressure groups do go too far. For example, the EDL, they were a pressure group, and when they marched in Dudley, it wasn't legal, it wasn't a legal march, and they smashed loads of businesses' windows, and they actually shut down quite a few businesses. So there's no regulation of them, there's no control. If it's an established pressure group, something like Amnesty International, they've got rules, they've got boundaries, they work with the government. So you have to be careful with pressure groups. Yes, they're brilliant for taking part in democracy and they can make changes, but also they can go too far. So what makes campaigning successful? Having the funds is always important. If your campaign's got more money, you can afford advertising. You can also pay for your members not to go to work. So you can do that as your job. And that way you've got more pressure, more people spending more time. Celebrity endorsement, Jamie Oliver's the easiest one to use and his campaign for healthier school dinners. You could also use Marcus Rashford and his campaign to get school dinners vouchers over coronavirus over the 6 weeks holiday. And then the cause, what is it you're actually campaigning for? Is it something people are going to care about? So are your aims clear? Think about the Million Mask March. They went on the march through London for what? They didn't say who they were because they're anonymous. They didn't say what they wanted. They caused a bit of trouble. How could they ever be successful? Because they had no aims. So your key terms you need to know are advocacy, which is where your people stand up and support and promote a cause, and then pressure group. Okay, and these are the different methods. You know the different methods, you know their positives, you know their negatives. I've given you a couple of examples there as well. But just press pause and make sure you can go through all of those by yourselves. Okay, and then the last bit of life in modern Britain. So we need to know about identity. We have got different identities. So identity is our characteristics that make us who we are. For example, our age and our gender. But you also have an identity through your nationality. So are you British? Are you French? Are you Pakistani? Your class means your economic identity. So your social class. Are you working class, middle class, upper class? And your ethnicity is an identity as well, your ethnic identity. Multiple identities means that you have got a range of identities within one of those categories. So, for example, under nationality, your mum and dad could have been from Pakistan, but you were born in the UK. Under class, you could be that you've got a middle class job, like me, I'm a teacher, I've got a middle class job, I earn a good wage, it's a profession, but I consider myself working class because my background's working class, my interests are working class, I live in a working class area. Okay, prejudice then. This is when you prejudge someone. It's literally what the word says based on one characteristic. For example, you might think all blondes are dumb. You also might have prejudices against people of different ethnic groups, against gay people, and so on and so forth. Discrimination is when you actually act on those prejudices. So, for example, you're prejudiced against Asian people because you've already judged what kind of people they're going to be, and then you decide you're going to act on it. So, for example, you might call them a name, you might choose not to employ them in a job, you might punch them, anything like that. Tolerance is about being respectful of all people, regardless of their characteristics. A key act you need to know is the Equality Act of 2010. That's the law that put into practice discrimination being illegal. So, for example, you cannot go around and racially insult people. It's against the law. You cannot sack somebody because of their ethnicity. You cannot not allow a couple in your hotel because they are gay, and so on and so forth. Your global identity is how you interact with the world around you. So, for example, you're probably all on social media. You probably all access sites from and pages from all over the world. You might talk to people from all over the world. You could go on holiday abroad or buy clothes and goods from different countries and listen to music from other places. So, particularly as time goes on, we're becoming more of a global, we have more of a global identity. Okay, so we'll follow that up then with migration and immigration. So immigration is someone moving into a country. Im sounds like in, so coming in. Emigration is when somebody leaves. So M starts with E, like exit. So emigration is leaving, immigration's coming in. Net migration is the difference between the amount of people moving in and going out. And community cohesion is what we aim for. It's where all people have got common values and get on with one another. Multiculturalism is the society that we live in with a variety of different ethnic groups. So we know when it comes to migration post World War II, the UK government asked people from British colonies to come and work in the UK. So lots of people from the West Indies particularly to come and fill jobs. We then had in 1972 British passport holders can settle in the UK if they've got a work permit, and under the 1992 Maastricht Treaty was freedom of movement in the UK. So push and pull factors, push to emigrate from different countries. You might have poverty in your country, there might be war, there might be high crime, there might be an unstable government, you might be persecuted. And a pull for UK to come to the UK, it could be about getting a good job, it could be about not being persecuted, having political stability, and all those kind of things. So when it comes to immigration, there's lots of different arguments about it. So we have got arguments for immigration. We've got the fact that immigrants have actually contributed far more money than they've taken out. So a lot of people believe that in the against points, they're a drain on resources, they only come to get benefits, all that kind of stuff. They've actually contributed £5 billion more than they've taken out. There's more than enough housing. We can't say that there's nowhere for them to live. There's over 500,000 homes in the UK that are just lying there empty. They also fill a lot of the jobs and skills that people in this country do not want. So porters in hospitals, cleaners, carers, all those kind of things. A lot of immigrants take the jobs that UK people refuse to do. And also it adds to the culture of the UK. We get more food, music and things. Okay, so let's have a look at the media then. We know in this country, because we're a democracy, we've got a free press. That means that media in the UK is free from political bias, and that newspapers in particular can print what they want within reason. There are, rules. They're not totally owned by the government. Our press is not owned by the government compared to somewhere like China where there's censorship, where they can't access the internet freely. We've got a free press. It's part of our democracy. It's the media's job to hold those in power to account. So Piers Morgan, for example, I'm not his biggest fan, but on Good Morning Britain, he hammers the government ministers when they come on, and that's probably why they're boycotting it. The IPSO deals with complaints from the public about the press. That was what was put in place after the PCC collapsed under the Leveson inquiry. So if you remember the hacking of phones that the News of the World did, they had to launch an inquiry by Lord Leveson to see if the press should be more regulated by the government. And basically they've said that newspapers should not be regulated by the government, they should be self-regulated, because we're a democracy and it's a huge part of our democracy. But they needed new rules, and the new rules, part of that was the IPSO. Media have got a responsibility, they've got to be accurate in their news. They have to give people an opportunity to reply. We've still got human rights on privacy. You can't harass people. You shouldn't be picturing children or giving away children's names and things. And that victims should be looked after too. The media has got a massive influence. The MPs' expense scandal, when they uncovered the fact that MPs were fraudulently claiming money, it was the newspapers that reported that, and some MPs ended up in trouble with the law. It led to many of them being sacked. They have got to hold people in power to account. It's a massive part of our democracy. Also remember that the media can influence even elections. So for example, the Sun newspaper is the biggest selling newspaper in the country. Every single political party they support wins the election. Is that because the Sun supports them, or is that just because they choose to support the party that seems like they're going to win? Who knows, but it's certainly an ongoing trend. The media does influence us. We've just got to be careful how we are influenced by it. So possible topics, you could have the UK leaving any of the big organisations, tighter immigration controls, tighter media controls, or maybe something on multiculturalism.